Welcome, everybody, to the Urantia book. This is the channel where we read and discuss the 2,000-page revelation of truth to this planet that will not only change our lives individually, but help uplift us collectively. This book covers some really deep and heady topics, but it also has some very easy to grasp observations. Remember, this book is to be a lifelong study, so don't get bogged down if you're not grasping what we're reading today. This is a passage that is very complicated. It's the three absolutes. And remember, this book is attempting to reveal the nature of God to us. And it's almost like describing the characteristics and nature of the brain. You can understand that on a very deep physiological level about neurons and neuropeptides and everything. Or you can just simply say, well, I'm thinking. So, I understand it enough to use it. But this book is like trying to describe the brain to you. And if you don't understand what's being said here, just remember it's happening all around you. You're feeling it. You're absorbing it. You're moving through these levels spiritually, okay? Which is a level that's even beyond the mind. So let's continue our read through. Please make sure that you like and subscribe. We need to get the word out there. We need to get this book into the mainstream. So let's continue on here, folks. The three absolutes. When the combined thought of the universal Father and the eternal Son, functioning in the God of action, constituted the creation of the divine and central universe, the Father followed the expression of his thought into the word of his Son and the act of their conjoint executive by differentiating his Havona presence from the potentials of infinity. Okay, so that's the three persons of the Trinity there, okay? The Father and the Son, and then the conjoint executive. That's the third person, which Christianity referred to as the Holy Ghost or the Holy Spirit. Okay, they call it the conjoint actor, the God of action here. There's different names for that. So Havona, remember, is the central universe. So that's the perfect universe. That's not an evolving universe like we're existing in right now. And so the Father differentiated his presence, okay, from the potentials of infinity. So again, you're trying to describe these very, very deep concepts here. And these undisclosed infinity potentials remain space concealed in the unqualified absolute and divinely enshrouded in the deity absolute, while these two become one in the functioning of the universal absolute, the unrevealed infinity unity of the paradise Father. Okay, so that's the three absolutes right there. Okay, so there's these undisclosed infinity potentials. So it's just like completely beyond, our comprehension right now. Okay, so they're space concealed in the unqualified absolute and divinely enshrouded in the deity absolute. And then there's the third one, the universal absolute. Both potency of cosmic force and potency of spirit force are in process of progressive revelation, realization as the enrichment of all reality is affected by the experiential growth and through the correlation of the experiential with the existential by the universal absolute. Okay, so all reality, this stuff is happening all around us right now. Okay, this is God. There's this existential, we talked about this before, and experiential. Okay, existential, always perfect, always complete. Experiential, growing and learning. Or I don't know if learning is even the right word, but whatever, though, it's experiencing. By virtue of the equipoising presence of the universal absolute, the first source and center realizes extension of experiential power, enjoys identification with his evolutionary creatures. Okay, so that's now our level here. Okay, the first source and center, remember, that's God the Father. So identification. So okay, so this amazingly, deep being is able to identify with creatures that are on this level of like really far removed from that because we're indwelt by that. bestowed, and achieves expansion experiential deity on the levels of the supremacy, ultimacy, and absoluteness. Okay, that's the experiential levels. The supreme is the time-space one. The ultimate is one step beyond time-space experiencing. And the absolute is like, don't even bother. Don't even bother. When it is not possible fully to distinguish the deity absolute from the unqualified absolute, their supposedly combined function or coordinate presence is designated the action of the universal absolute. Okay, so those, again, a trinity is good because a relationship of two is just kind of like this back and forth tennis match, right? But then when you have this third, remember this is a trinity of absolutes, then now there's all these new dynamic relationships that can take place between them. The deity absolute seems to be the all-powerful activator, while the unqualified absolute appears to be the all-efficient mechanizer of the supremely unified and ultimately coordinated universe of universes, even universes upon universes, made, making, and yet to be made. Okay, so there's these mechanisms in place. This is like, okay, so like back in the day when when humans tried to contemplate God, we would do things like say, well, God is a turtle. The earth is a turtle, like if you're looking at your Native American traditions, and that's just the human mind, right? That's how we would reach out. Or we'd say, oh, God is a loving father, like we do, which is undeniably, the truth, that's the best concept of deity that anybody can have in the universe, and they point that out in the book, that God is a loving father. So all this complicated business, just go back to your idea. Okay, well, God is a loving father, but then it's like, well, do you want more than that? Do you want us to reveal a little bit more than just, the world is a turtle? Well, here it is. There's these mechanisms in place, okay, about making universes. The deity absolute cannot, or at least does not, react to any universe situation in a sub-absolute manner. So remember, absolute is just beyond ultimate. It's the thing that we can't really understand. Every response of this absolute to any given situation appears to be made in terms of the welfare of the whole creation of things and beings, not only in its present state of existence, but also in view of the infinite possibilities of all future eternity. The deity absolute is that potential which was segregated from total, infinite reality by free will choice of the universal Father, and within which all divinity activities, existential, experiential, take place. Okay, so that's the deity absolute. So you're contemplating where the universal Father was. You're putting your mind into the mind of the universal Father and say, I'm going to make a free will choice, okay, to separate from total infinite reality. Okay, so we're just going to now break down reality a little bit. So there's relative time-space reality, there's total infinite, blah, 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 blah. And so when that happens, all right, deity absolute. And within which all divinity activities, existential and experiential, take place. This is the qualified absolute in contradistinction to the unqualified absolute. But the universal absolute is superadditive to both in the encompassment of all absolute potential. Okay? So that's within the deity absolute. There's the qualified and the unqualified. Unqualified, it just doesn't need to be, there needs to be no other thing in order to exist, in order for that to exist. Whereas qualified, there needs to be some even concept or some spiritual understanding which needs to be there in order to qualify it. Unqualified is like, forget about it. So let's look at that. Unqualified absolute. The unqualified absolute is non-personal, extra-divine, and undeified. The unqualified absolute is therefore devoid of personality, divinity, and all creator prerogatives. Neither fact nor truth, experience nor revelation, philosophy nor absonity, how do you say that? That's a word that they're, a new word for us, that's without ending, basically, are able to penetrate the nature and character of this absolute without universe qualification. There's just no way to even, but can you experience it? I'm sure on spiritual levels, if you attain those levels. I mean, nothing is arbitrarily closed off to any being in the universe. So if it's attainable, then it should be attainable, and it makes sense for it. It's if it's not attainable, then it's just because it's just simply not attainable, and you can't put 9 ounces into an 8-ounce cup. Let it be made clear that the unqualified here's a good, I like this part. Let it be made clear that the unqualified absolute is a positive reality pervading the grand universe and apparently extending with equal space presence on out into the force activities of the pre-material evolutions of the staggering stretches of the space regions beyond the 7 superuniverses. The unqualified absolute is not a mere negativism of philosophic concept predicated on the assumptions of metaphysical sophistries concerning the universality, dominance, and primacy of the unconditioned and unqualified. The unqualified absolute is a positive universe over control in infinity. This over control is space force unlimited, but is definitely conditioned by the presence of life, mind, spirit, and personality, and is further conditioned by the will reactions and purposeful mandates of the paradise trinity. So it's saying that in metaphysics, and Buddhist and Hindu is largely metaphysical, and so they're contemplating this as this just they call it an ether. Here, let's just read this part. We are convinced that the unqualified absolute is not an undifferentiated and all-pervading influence comparable either to the pantheistic concept, that's your Buddhist and Hinduist, of metaphysics, or to the sometime ether hypothesis of science. Okay, they used to think that everything was suspended in this ether. The unqualified absolute is force unlimited and deity conditioned. All right, so it's still conditioned by God the Father, but we do not fully perceive the relation of this absolute to the spirit realities of the universe. So they don't know how. It's a mystery. There's a large mystery here in the universe, and that's what we would want. We want a profound, romance adventure of trying to penetrate these mysteries, which is what we're trying to do now here. So this seemingly deep, complicated section is just getting our mind and our brain connections to move in these different ways about trying now we have a little point of reference when we're thinking into the vastness of eternity. We have this little thing called the unqualified absolute, and however vague and foggy and mysterious that is, but it's just our little flagpole into trying to understand these things. And when we're trying to understand it, it's not just this non-entity ether thing, or just this it is like a metaphysical concept might be trying to think of, they call it something, either Atma, or no, wait, is it Atma? There's some Hindu word for it. It's just this everythingness. But they're saying that it's really like a positive thing, positive both in charge, or but also in positively in what's the word, value. Okay, so you can take that word positive and think about values, goodness. So it's positive in those values because it's conditioned by the God the Father. It's not a separate. So anyways, trying to complicate that. But now you have a little bit of a reference as to what the heck is really, how is God really functioning here to make all these things happening, blah, 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 blah. So we'll get to this next point the next day, the universal absolute, which is the third part of it. Okay, thanks for watching. Remember, like and subscribe, comment, ask questions, and we'll see you next time.